Hello and welcome to our webcast today. Can supply chain visibility prepare you to manage disruptions? I'm Uwe Schulte, the leader of the Global Sustainability Center of the Conference Board, and I'm very pleased to have you all here. And before we get started, let me first of all remind you of the lockdown situation all of us are in, and I would like to say that the Conference Board is providing a lot of written and recorded resources to help you to get through that quite difficult situation, and please feel free to make use of that. Also, I would like to express my thoughts for those who are suffering from this situation severely, and also I think we all like to always express our thanks to those who are helping those who are suffering. Before we really get started, first of all, I would like to, sorry for that. First of all, I would like to introduce to you our panelists of today. First of all, Hans Keris. He's an experienced executive leader working in leading companies in their field like Philips and now Danfoss, heading total global supply teams in Europe and in Asia. He's a procurement steering board member and does cross-company integration and alliance and partnership work, and he's leading the transformation and the implementing change. He's also an active member of our European Procurement Leadership Council. Welcome to you, Hans. Our second participant is Michael Ginab. He has over 30 years of experience in supply chain management in the process industry as well as automotive and logistics services. He held strategic management positions he held strategic management positions both in local as well as regional and global functions. Michael is the founder of Avieno, a consultancy offering diagnostics, training and coaching in the field of supply chain management and consumer service excellence to companies from various industries. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, Uwe. Hi, everyone. A pleasure.
So before we get started and hear from our panel, let me just do a few logistical announcements. You can ask questions at any point in time, and we encourage you to do so, be it for clarification or making a point or asking an additional question. You can do that by typing it into the bottom left-hand chat box, and we will attend to those questions as it is appropriate during the presentations or after the presentations in the Q&A section. The presentation you see today, you can download in the next box next to the chat box, and feel free to do so. If you wish to see the slides in full screen, on the top there you see 4 arrows, and if you click on those, you can put the slides in full screen mode, and if you want to come out of it, you click on that symbol again. The webcast of today is going to be recorded, and therefore you can share this webcast with your colleagues. It will be available on demand. Please think of giving us feedback because that will improve our service to you, and therefore at the end you will be asked for that, and please spend the 2 minutes to give you us that feedback. That's much appreciated. You can earn professional development credits, CPD and CPE. You have to provide your email address and select the credits you would like. During the program, you have to click on prompts that will occur, and you have to stay for that for the entire webcast online. These credits are only available in the online webcast. In the recording, unfortunately not. This webcast is brought to you by the Global Sustainability Center of the Conference Board, and the aim of this center is to support member companies to create long-term value and positive impact through sustainability integration. If you want to learn more about us, you find us on the Conference Board website. So, after these brief introductions, let's get to our theme of today. And I would like to start with Michael. Michael, looking at your long-standing experience and summarizing what you have learned throughout the crisis now, how do you judge supply chain visibility as a means to manage disruptions?
Thanks, Uwe. And I think everyone understands that the question per se is a rhetorical question. It's a bit like if you sit in a Ferrari in the first gear, but only with fog in front of you and can't see and have a back rear view mirror, you can't use it properly. So in other words, without visibility, it will be difficult to maneuver quickly. And if you allow me to take, if you like, a holistic approach to first step into supply chains and visibility and what it can do in a disruptive situation, then of course it goes without saying that if you have little visibility, not really understanding where your partners are, who they are, even first tier to many companies, that is a difficult thing to have at the tip of a finger or a click of a button and have the full exploded vision of a supply network. And that is not even to mention. So limited visibility, without saying, is of course leading to the fact that it takes you too long to check out what really has happened and what the consequences of a disruption would be, upstream or downstream your supply chain. So finding the right responses is difficult if you don't know where you are and what the context is in which you operate. And I'm going a bit deeper on that in a moment, but I think also, again, from a holistic perspective, if you allow, everyone would understand the old joke about the two men running through the savannah, and all of a sudden they see a lion, where one of the two men bows down and to track on the sporting shoes, the running shoes, and the other one says, hey, you will be too slow for the lion to catch you, and the other one says, well, I only need to be faster than you. And that's also about the visibility. If you have more visibility, if you're better prepared to know tier 1, tier 2, and maybe even further tiers, up and downstream your supply chain, you will have a competitive advantage. Quite a lot of companies have worked tremendously on visibility, transparency in their supply chains, which are really supply networks. And there's a couple of ingredients that you need, and I'll address them in a minute, that are prerequisites to achieve good transparency end to end, so to speak. So it is, without saying a clear yes, you need visibility to be better prepared to respond in a crisis. Now, what does that mean? Let's look at the risk of managing your supply chains, and I know Hans will address that also a little bit later. But I look at it from two angles. One is the maturity as an organization or a company, a corporation, to deal with risks. And there's also a dilemma. Let me address the maturity stages and simplify it here. So it's weak if you don't know what's coming. Yeah, if you don't know what kind of disruption will hit you and what the overall impact may be, that's a weak point. And it's to a good degree forgivable. Yeah, if you don't know, and it's the first time, like in this crisis right now, with all the ripple-on effects, it's a forgivable but not very mature stage. Even weaker is if in principle you know what could be coming, but you don't know really what to do. If you have not exercised on disaster recovery, for example, then I think it's a weaker situation, but still you may call that almost forgivable. And you already know, of course, and you sense that how companies deal with risks associated with operating their businesses is a question of culture, a question of being risk averse, maybe even is a question of what have you experienced in the past. But the weakest point is, of course, if in principle you know what could be coming, but knowingly not acting upon it. That I would call quite unforgivable, maybe not legally, but maybe from a societal and organizational perspective to shareholders, stakeholders, employees, and partners along the chain in trade, almost criminal. And the word criminal I use very carefully. And you know from this COVID-19 history that comes through all kinds of sources that most societies have had good crisis management meetings and teams preparing for pandemics, but acting upon it is apparently a psychological phenomenon that manage supply chains, manage businesses, manage societies, manage politics is a tricky path. And also, just to excuse it in a way, there is a dilemma with managing risks. And that dilemma is, I have experienced that a good 20 years ago, where I was in the European role, preparing the company I worked for a big transformation of our product portfolio. And my team and I were in charge of avoiding the risks, stock outs and obsoletes and all the rest of it. Now, part of my job was doing a risk assessment for this. Now, my learning was, first of all, you can paralyze a company by only looking at the risks. And secondly, it has eventually cultural consequences. If everyone likes to roll up the sleeves and just do around you in a meeting, maybe your peers, and you are the one in the corner always raising finger, pointing at risks, you look, forgive me my language, but you look like the party pooper and be cornered out at a certain point in time. So I think that the true essence of risk management is well balancing the risks that you address and mitigating for it. And I like the English expression for this, which is taking a chance. That sounds much more positive than taking a risk. Another point for clarification, if we look at visibility along the supply chain, it's not new, but it needs to be said. It's not a chain. We're all operating in networks where our company, our organization is our factory, our warehouse, our headquarters is just one dot connected with many dots around it. Be it upstream to suppliers and suppliers, or downstream market channel partners, distributors, wholesalers, retail, and consumers at the end. And hardly do we find companies that have full visibility about all these tiers up and downstream around them in their network. And I didn't even mention logistics service providers, brokers, customer authorities, etc. So the network character of today's global trade is the true challenge in building full visibility. There are some good startups, and technology, digitization, and digitalization is helping on it. However, it has a couple of complications, one of which is privacy. And I put it straight, why should your tier 2 or tier 3 supplier disclose the contractual relationship to your tier 1 supplier just for you to understand who upstream is maybe a source of risk? And that's one of the critical challenges right now, that if you want to gain true visibility, the concept of the focal company comes into play. In other words, if you are meaningless, so to speak, to customers or suppliers alike, then the likelihood that you gain full visibility is very little. If, however, and the popular examples are, of course, around automotive, if you're an original equipment manufacturer, like an automotive manufacturer, then probably you have more power, more say as a focal company to gain full visibility up and downstream, because it's about you and your products, your brands, and the power that you have. So the interesting thing, I believe, also in gaining visibility in the supply chain network is that a lot of the current crisis and the responses to it are very transaction-based. And no surprise, because you got parts to source and material to transport, and it's all about satisfying needs. By the way, not only looking upstream, which was the first wave of the crisis right now, early January, but more downstream as well. While you try to get all the materials from your suppliers, maybe in Asia, right now, the problem is much more the demand side, which breaks away. And we know of companies that get material over to their sites, let's say in Europe or North America, and all of a sudden stock is piling up. So next to the transactional perspective of managing risks along a supply chain is a strategic one, which, by the way, is tremendously in the way of gaining visibility, because in many cases, most cases actually that I know of, your tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers make investment decisions on capacity without asking the next in the chain. And that is very typical, because also, they don't know which part of the total network they are, and may even not know where their parts are built into after components have been formed, to which markets or channels these go. And that builds a bridge to, I think, my last slide here, which is just a couple of remarks on the responses in the current crisis, where we see some, I think, very human, direct responses, which is kind of a reflex, if you like. If you're hit by a shortage of supply, beginning of this year from China, later in India and the rest of the world, then one of the typical reflexes, and I'm looking forward to the discussion also with Hans and his experience, is regionalize. Get everything back to local. It's a bit like in this picture you can see everyone back home to the castle, and then you are safe. It happens, I'm also bound with the conference board, and I'm very pleased I can serve as a director of the Digital Supply Chain Transformation Council. One of our members told us the story. They have a factory with everything of their suppliers around this factory local. Unfortunately, this factory is based in New York, and it was hit immediately by the effect of COVID-19. So distance is much less important today, also because the logistics systems have evolved with global trade. And by the way, that goes hand in hand. So instead, I would say, emphasize the character of networks. And I have, one particular recommendation here is, which I come back to in a moment. Then the other aspect of looking at a distance and distant markets is that these are not only sources of supply, they're actually markets for demand. So if today in Germany, I'm based in Germany, we talk about automotive manufacturing and how can we be so dependent on China? Well, the problem is not so much that we only have suppliers in China. It's actually one of the biggest markets for selling cars. So these two things go hand in hand as well. And last but not least, it's not only about supply chain. And I guess, Hans, also, I'm pointing or handing over to you in a moment. The best partners on the supply side are also the good access to technology and know-how. And just by cutting short and bringing everything home, in inverted commas, is probably leaving the organization falling short of access to knowledge. And that should be seen as a broader context as well. So that a takeaway really is, if you want to build more resilience into your supply chains, it's probably thinking hard about redundancy. A network, if you think in systems, a network is more stable than one-to-one relationships. If something falls off, you should have an opportunity to, well, mitigate the risk by, employing alternatives, which is coming with a price tag. And that, of course, is probably the deeper cause of the issue, that if you want to buffer up for risks, you have to pay a price for it. And that's not an easy thing in global competition. Last, and I close with this, is 3 recommendations. Number 1 is segment your supply chains strategically. Know which of your supply chains that you operate are the most critical ones. And then create for the critical ones a true kind of end-to-end, as far as you can, transparency to know which parts from which nodes are affecting which kind of markets along the chain. And thirdly, simulate and assess the risks, the vulnerabilities, and decide on mitigation strategies. And also within your peer team and as a management group, decide on which risks not to mitigate and have an agreement on that. With that, I stop for now. I'm happy to hand over to Hans. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Michael. Before we enter the realm of the practical experience of Hans, a couple of questions. And what I would like to say to the audience, please feel free to write questions on the bottom left corner, and we will put them to our panelists to be answered. So make use of the experience here and ask them any questions you like, and if they can't answer them now, we will find a way to come back to you later. Michael, my question to you is, you mentioned in passing there are now tools that can help you. Can you just be a bit more specific about this?
Yeah, sure. So right now, I know I have 2 contacts. I recently followed also webcasts on this. I'm not disclosing sources, but if you like to leave a message, I think we can also then point you at it. But there's another way to research it, which is called Google. What is possible right now on the basis of really good applications is that one platform I have in mind in particular is operating as a neutral source, a kind of legally neutral source, as a platform where self-maintenance of data for your first-tier suppliers is captured. So they would self-maintain their own data, supplying certain material to you, populate this platform, and would invite their own suppliers of certain material that is subject to this supply chain. And then even the 3rd and maybe 4th tier suppliers are invited in waves, staggered, so that you don't violate the privacy conditions here with access to the data. The whole platform, though, through this neutral force, is offering the opportunity to identify if in a certain region, a country, if for a certain site, a factory, for example, or a warehouse, we have a risk associated with it. You can populate, also by the way, downstream for customers and market channel partners, the same applies. You can channel through how a certain part on one end is affecting certain customers in the other end. And that I believe is the trick, to carve out, to slice closer to identifying quickly where the problem sits. And let's not forget, in most companies, even the big ones that I've seen, with current crisis management teams and war rooms, etc., the problem is that no single person has the full perspective on what the supply chains are looking like. And there very few have. Hardly there is one repository with the single source of truth about who is and what is involved in each of the supply networks that you operate. And that's the tricky part. So underneath, without good master data, nothing of this is very likely to happen.
Michael, a very true word, and probably most of the audience and myself have suffered from that many times. So, and it's not an easy thing to overcome, as we know. Thank you so much, Michael. Let's get to some practical experience from Hans. Hans, I know that you have worked very actively before the crisis was hitting in risk management and built a risk management system. Can you share what that did to you and how it worked in the crisis? And before you do, I think most of us know who Danfoss is, but maybe you should just share a little bit so we know which market we're talking about.
Yeah. Thank you, Uwe. Thanks also, Michael, for the introductions there, which is very much linked to the topic I want to discuss. Indeed, I've been building on a system for Danfoss, and why did we want to do that? I'll show you a quick update on Danfoss here. We have 4 segments, and here you can see also a little bit the complexity. We have about 72 factories worldwide. With different systems. Some more mechanical, some more electrical, in power solutions, in cooling and drives and heating. With a lot of customers also sitting worldwide, with a flexibility need, meaning that sometimes we order one piece, sometimes we order with 10,000s of pieces at a time. So it was important for us to start talking about the supply chain visibility, about the risk management, not only from a ordering perspective, but also from a regional and global perspective, as also Michael explained just before. What is also seeing is that there is a need more and more to transform our company with electrification, with food supply, with urbanization, digitalization, and of course climate change, which is a hot topic as we speak. So being fast to market, innovate with the supply base, understanding the risks here was the key driver to start acting. And with the unfortunate situation we are in now, COVID situation, we find it very important to test our tools, and I'll give you a little heads up on that here. And one of the greatest opportunity we find out at the end is, of course, supplier relationship management. If you have a strong relationship, if you have an open dialogue with your supply base, you communicate frequently, and you manage, as Michael just mentioned it, a network, meaning for me also as well internally as externally, then you make already a big step forward. So what we did is we had regular business review meetings with the supply base. We had executive sponsorship for the critical supply base in place, which is not necessarily from procurement or supply chain, but also from business management to get let's say also an understanding on what it is we're working with. But also understanding the risk profile, as I mentioned, of this supplier, and openly discuss this. So the top management and in the annual executive meetings, risk management is a key agenda point. At the end, you want to create value together with the supply base. So this is end-to-end need from the supply base and the supplier towards our customers. This value roadmap needs to be known. What we did on top of this during the crisis, which started already for us as we are a global company when China was in lockdown, was that we started talking about a SharePoint site, an understanding of what is the current risk we have, and we used templates. We had daily updates, and we had access to all the needed persons here to understand what's happening. So from a sales point of view towards a supply chain point of view, we knew what could be the risk. What we also did is, of course, sharing with our suppliers that our first priority is to keep people safe and keep factories running. We saw a competitive advantage here, because if you close down complete factory and start to ramp up after 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, it's more difficult. So we had an upfront need to keep factories running, whilst of course keep people safe at the same time. By doing so, we put it in a letter to all our suppliers. Doesn't matter if they are preferred or strategic, all our suppliers are important here, with a thank you message that they supply us. And we also included the letters of the different segments we have towards the suppliers, showing the importance of the essential businesses we are in. We are supporting infrastructure, food chain, transportation, agriculture. That of course helped to keep several suppliers, their factories open, at least their supply chain. What we also have asked our category manager, our supplier responsibles, to talk regularly 2 to 3 times per week with the suppliers in the critical area. We started, of course, first with China, as I mentioned, but then Italy came, then Spain, other countries were added. So it was for us important, as we have factory supply in every region in the world, to have a regular contact point with our supply base. That could well be just say hello, how are things going, to manage a critical situation. And on top of that, to make fast decisions, we had a 30-minute video call, because we're also all sitting at home, as some of us still do. And we talked several times per week, 3 times, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays in the beginning, to take fast decisions if we needed to. So all of us were in the leadership team on the same let's say, speed, and the same decisions and the same information. Of course, when you talk about risk management, agility is actually why we do it. Michael discussed a little bit about regional versus global supply chains. We were able, because we had multiple, let's say, sources in not this New York case only, let's say, but we had multiple sources where we could move in the supply chain to other regions. We could do that not only on our own, but also we have validated, because we saw that some suppliers, when we started the whole risk management system, we were depending on only one site. We asked 2, 3 sites to be approved as a supplier. This helped us to move from one region to the other in case of supply disruptions. Of course, an ability to flex up and down is important as well. So when you move from one region to the other, you need to have the flexibility in the supply chain. When we had consignment, it was easier than when you are depending on a supplier which is close to your factory. But at the end, we showed even more importance in this one. As I mentioned, local for local to only global supply chains is very, very important for agility in this respect, and also risk management. One thing, however, has to be understood. When we had a sudden lockdown of for example, India, of a site or a complete country, and suddenly your supply disrupts for, let's say, in one go for 100%, sometimes it's good to have a global supply chain when you have parts on the boat and your ability to move in that respect a little bit, you have a little bit more time to move from one side to the other to also get supply up and running. So what was a good learning here is that local for local versus global is a good system to have in place. Not only global, and maybe also not only local for local, but have your global view. Impact on transportation, as we all know, that's a big risk. Here we are not done yet, because there are still a lot of transport routes not open. But that was also a big learning here, that it comes all back to local for local and local for global to manage transportation part even better. Good learning was also that fast decision making is very nice. The video calls we had in place made faster decisions than trying to send emails around or organize formal meetings in 1 or 2 weeks from now. Having this fixed agenda point end-to-end, having sales input straight away into the procurement and supply chain decisions was also very nice to have. We also used third-party information coming from announcements of global websites. Could be a risk tool we have put in place. A lot of information came in which was analyzed and shared straight away. So at the end, the ability for us to have this fast up and running and we had no real interruptions in our supply chain was because we were prepared up front, but also were very agile during the crisis. So what did we learn from that? So in some areas we are post-crisis, like for example in China. And this ramp-up management is then the next phase, because how to get from a, let's say, it close to a standstill in some areas and some production sites to a full, maybe 120% load. That requires, again, good cooperation. So we have not stopped at all our weekly calls and our talks with our supply base. What is also important now is that we start looking at the supply chain from a financial risk point of view, that we are asking some leading and lagging questions about the financial situation of our supply base. We started at the beginning of May, and that is very important as well to supply chain disruptions. What was mentioned by Michael also in the beginning of this video webcast is that the end-to-end supply chain visibility, first, second, third tier visibility, we had quite a good view on some areas, but also became apparent that it is not in place in all. And here we have put now extra efforts in to create that visibility and use digital tools for that. What we are doing at this moment, and we started actually yesterday with implementing fast track some of the learnings into a standard way of working. So we had a first review yesterday within the leadership team, and we are continuing that in 2 weeks from now because we want to be fast in implementing, first of all, in case if there's coming a second wave, but it also helped us to be not only crisis management, but also show towards our customers a competitive advantage. So for us, it was already known, but it is still the case that if you know your risks and you can manage it up front, and again here, it's not making sure you have mitigated 100% because it's simply too costly, but you know you have like a roadmap. You have items to pull out of your process where you can fast implement change. That is also part of mitigation and risk management. It is some time and efforts to install it, but we have seen it creates good insights upfront. It creates as a platform to navigate through the crisis because you have visibility. And to be honest, it still does, because we still are not done yet in further improving it and managing the current risks we still see. That was it from my point of view.
Thank you so much, Hans. And your talk already inspired a question here from Paul-Erik Anderson. He says, trust some of the learning points that has worked well during the crisis will continue post-corona. How do you see that?
Yes, it definitely does. As we did yesterday, a review, the visibility management, the continuation of having, let's say, making our supplier responsible, the CEO of the supplier, as we call it, making sure that they understand in depth the supply chain and continue to further move end-to-end visibility is just to name a few of these critical factors. We have also now looking at mapping more clear the total let's say supply chain in our second tier management, also in an online tool that everybody can see this and put easy access information. So a lot of activities we have started, we continue, and we document now to update processes when needed.
Thank you, Hans. And Michael, would you want to say something about where you see learning points that will continue after the Corona crisis, which didn't get so much attention beforehand?
Yeah, maybe that one. What we exchanged recently as experience from the last 5 months was it all started with full attention to China, Asia, with regard to ensuring supply. And it soon then affected the rest of the world. It affected, as Hans already said, the transport systems. But what you need to do when you step into a crisis is you need to manage demand. And also I'd like to add to what Hans already said. So while on the one hand side the learning is also to maintain and check the financial healthiness of your suppliers, early on also check the financial healthiness of your customers. Because what we've seen also by now ramping up in China or in Asia with regard to the output of production is that apparently the customers now try to slow down the output because the inventory is just either in transit somewhere on a ship, if they get a ship, or piling up at their warehouses while the demand has gone down. And that's, we talk supply chain, but we mean networks, and that's end to end. So only looking into one direction is never very helpful. And I think that's a big learning. Actually, a colloquial way, 40 years in supply chain management. It was in March. I heard on German television for the first time in 40 years. I heard a politician call out the word supply chain, and I think that's a symptom of people getting more into how global trade really looks like and how interconnected everything is. It's not just one-sided. I think that's a key thing.
Thank you, Michael. It wouldn't be me if I'm not raising a different aspect here. And I would like to encourage the audience, like Paul-Erik, to write down questions. We will be very happy to answer them. But let me raise mine for both of you. When I look at what has been happening in the past, a lot of people have been looking at their supply chain also, of course, from the perspective of human rights. And quite often, to be honest with you, I have seen box-ticking exercises, formal audits, and be happy with it, and so on and so forth. What we now have seen is that the poor conditions for migrant workers, take the situation in Singapore, take the production of PE equipment in Indonesia, has caused disruptions to supply chains and meat workers in the US and in Europe, just due to the fact that human rights were really not adhered to. So would you see a need to address that more seriously than we've done that in the past?
So if I may go.
Yeah, sure, please.
Yes, absolutely. However, I'm not so convinced that you just, as an organization, as a company, can just step forward other than you are really a focal company with a lot of market power and almost monopoly. It needs regulatory alignment because what you just emphasized, Uwe, and of course, is a matter of country or economic regional competition scheme. And part of the competition between different economic areas on this planet actually happen on the regulatory legal aspects and then strictly or less strictly following up on these. And so as one player in an entire global trade network, it will be very difficult to just swim against the stream. So, and by the way, it's also us consumers. So as long as we are not interested in where the €1 T-shirts come from, and we still keep buying, then not much will change. I think that's. And let me take another example because we were discussing it because of obvious reasons. The pharmaceutical supply chains over the last, let's say, decade or 2 decades have moved a lot of their active ingredients to India and also China because of obvious reasons. Now, that's no coincidence. It's a natural effect of what is possible, and on the other hand, of what is required to keep our global health scheme at lower cost. And with now only calling out for more local or more human rights-oriented work schemes, probably is not enough. I guess personally, it requires regulatory action to set the guardrails in a more narrow way for a particular part of pharmaceutical supply chains that are essential to public interest.
Could I add something to that?
Sure, please, Hans.
Yeah, I think it is important to understand also that the UN Global Compact, let's say, where many companies have assigned to, that's also important as a body to make sure that things are followed up and followed through, and it's more than tick of a box, in my opinion. As you mentioned it, I think we have to live up to it. We have to put our products in the market with the same messages, and we have to regularly follow up. By having all these kind of companies assigned to it, and sign up to it, gives you an obligation already to manage this in a proper way. On top of that, when you do supplier visits, when you go there on your own to visit a supplier, one of my biggest learnings I've always said to the team members is don't only meet in a meeting room, go around and find out and take then proper action if you see something happening. So I think that is it's not only for one external body doing an audit. It is continuously an activity we have to work on.
Okay.
Uwe, if I may add
Sure.
a little thought here. I just figure out I may come across a bit critical here, but I'm much more optimistic than it sounds. And one of the reasons is mankind is more interconnected than ever before. So, and that is a big power for consumers. So to what degree consumers will value the fact that they know where meat is coming from, then they know what kind of conditions people work in if they are in the mines of somewhere in Africa, or how rare earth elements and minerals are carved out of the soil, the better and the more important and impactful it will be for manufacturers and people in the market, so operating supply chains. And I think that is very powerful. In order to bring it back to the risk discussion, though, I'd like to mention something else. Although we are all under the impression of COVID-19 and it's a disaster, it could happen worse. And just a few days ago, a colleague of mine mentioned it in an IT CIO conference. Just imagine no one of us would have access to the email inbox anymore as of tomorrow. And the next step behind is if energy goes down. If energy supply goes down, we would not even be able to communicate and act kind of in a swarm kind of behavior in response to a bigger crisis. And that's, these kind of disaster scenarios, I don't know who's busy with it. Very few organizations are, but that would be very, very impactful. By the way, also to public health. Hospitals without energy is a disaster. No need to explain.
Michael, thank you so much for cheering us up. But let me say that I've read the preparation report of the German government for a total failure of electricity in Germany for a period longer than a week. That is interesting reading, and what you will probably find if you are responsible for things like that, that this sort of literature is available everywhere in each country, that people have looked at that. The pandemic plans were there also to read, and I think Michael has indicated before, this was interesting drawer material, which you put into a drawer but not did anything about it. So maybe one of the learnings is that we should actually think more in systems and be better prepared. Let's come back to one thing. I've seen that people are typing away, but I don't see the there is the question coming now. So Gregory Ryan is writing, given the success that this just jumped on me. And Danfoss had, due to the pandemic disruption in their supply chain, did they look to help and teach others who had less success navigating their supply chains? For example, helping out healthcare systems on their supply chain needs? And Paul Eric says, almost criminal. I'm not quite sure what that means. Okay, so Hans, did you do some help on the healthcare supply chains which were in trouble?
Yes, we did. In different regions of the world, we had different support. Of course, where we can, because not all of our components, let's say, from the product's point of view, but we have, for example, supported local governments with masks and with other stuff as well. So we also supported, we also funded local communities as well on getting out of, for example, where people had food supply problems and or lost jobs. We have helped them in this area. So also from that sustainability point of view, we have helped where we could and where we can still.
Yeah. No, thank you. There might have been a misunderstanding. Michael, you're a consultant. You're not running your own supply chains, but have you done something in that field?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question. So I have the pleasure also to work as a global advisor for corporate members of the Association for Supply Chain Management, and where we have a strategic alliance with the Gates Foundation and the Global Fund. And so fighting the big diseases in the sub-Saharan zone, and I'm personally assigned to helping out in East Africa, starting with Kenya and Tanzania, for COVID-19 preparedness. And one of the things, why we do this is that also early the Gates Foundation and the Global Fund figured out that it's not just about pouring money in and bringing medicine down to the countries. It's actually having people trained and educated on basics of logistics, basics of supply chain management in some areas that are, from an infrastructure point of view, really difficult to manage. And so we educate, we pour in our knowledge and help people to help themselves.
Thank you both for that, and I think this is really much appreciated by everybody. Let me sort of coming closer to an end, try to bring some of the things together. Words we're going to hear a lot. We heard them before, but we will hear more in supply chain context is resilience and agility. Now, Michael, you introduced the word of the supply network, and I think this is much more adequately describing what is happening than a linear chain. And let's not even talk about circular here in this context now. That's a completely different discussion on its own. But wouldn't it mean that if we run this network knowingly and well, that we can build in resilience by collaborating with others, even so-called competitors without increasing the cost significantly? What would you say, Michael?
As you can expect, I would respond, it depends. And it depends really on where in the network you sit and whether or not you can leverage your influence. So and that's why the big corporations are really important to set the pace and set the pace and move forward and give signals. If we have from a global perspective a standard that we apply for process and performance metrics, which is called SCORE, the Supply Chain Operations Reference Model. And here, the strategic performance attributes are not only looking at service costs and asset management, but also at agility or adaptability, further on called flexibility. But it's interesting that this particular definition of that kind of performance attribute is looking at how well you can brief with your supply chain, responding to unforeseen but significant changes in demand. Read also and/or supply. And that is something that a lot of companies actually turn to for the first time, because it's not just an operational metric. It is really an acid test to how well are you operating your supply chain. By the way, as you said, Uwe, without additional penalties on cost. If you can just pay for it, well, that's then probably relatively easy if you're prepared to pay. But for no payment, to build agility into your supply chains in very many cases and very many industries really requires a completely new approach to designing supply networks, which even goes down to deciding on locations, deciding on certain further requirements in building up third parties and suppliers, and not only test them on quality and cost, etc., but on agility, and that is that's the next step. Let's say, I would say.
Thank you, Hans. Would you want to say something about using networks to build resilience?
I think that is by far something which is at the moment, I think, underutilized, understaffed. We have, as you called it, linear approach, unfortunately, in too many cases. But pulling in a customer, pulling in a second or third tier, pulling in maybe, like you said, a broader customer base of a supplier, or teaming up with could be competitors or partners in the industry, to be able to manage this kind of setup. I think it is underutilized, and it is definitely important to create resilience. If you asked the question before, what could we do in the different countries if the supply chain is disrupted by maybe code of conduct issues? Being strong as a partner network, that this cannot happen. Being strong in setting up, for example, local supply chains. If we all do this, then it will happen, and I think at the end we will be much more seen as a business which is promoting to work together and still make your own profit. Then if you try to do that alone, crying in the desert, let's say it like that. So
thank you.
Yeah, it's for me important, a very important topic.
Thank you, Hans. That's a very interesting point. Before we close, we had from Lutz Roschke something which I want to share here. Please emphasize the importance of addressing the emotional side of supply and demand. Imagine the focus of consumers would have been directed towards collecting cash instead of toilet paper. I thought that was a humorous finish to our conversation. So before we close, thank you very much to Michael and Hans for sharing your thoughts, experiences. That was very helpful for us. I would like to point out we have a new podcast series, Let's Talk Sustainable Business. Please subscribe to that on our website. The next webcasts are going to be sustainability leadership in 2020 and beyond, and community investment integrating social impact. And please take the last couple of minutes to give us your feedback in the feedback form that is coming your way now. Thank you for attending this webcast, and goodbye for today.
Stay safe.
Yeah.